The morning it happened, Joanna Steele was arguing with the vending machine on the third floor of Sunridge General. She had a system. She always had a system. Press B7, wait for the little arm to rotate. Catch the granola bar before it hit the bottom tray, because the tray had a crack in it, and the bar would wedge sideways, and you'd lose 95 cents and your patience in the same 30 seconds. It was a small, stupid thing to know, but knowing it meant breakfast. That was enough. She pressed B7. The arm rotated. She caught the bar. That was the kind of person Joanna Steele was. Practical, quiet, good at noticing things other people stopped bothering to notice. She had worked the overnight shift at Sunridge General for going on 4 years now, and in that time she had become a fixture of the place. The way the broken vending machine was a fixture, the way the flickering fluorescent in the east stairwell was a fixture. You stopped seeing fixtures, they just existed. Joanna was fine with that. She was 34 years old. She had dark hair she kept pulled back in the same low knot every shift, and a face that most people described, if they described it at all, as serious. She wore the same brand of nursing shoes, white, thick-soled, already broken in before she bought them secondhand, and she moved through the wards with an economy of motion that new residents sometimes found unnerving. No wasted steps, no visible hesitation. When a patient coded at 2 in the morning and the attending was still pulling on his gloves, Joanna was already at the bedside with the crash cart, already talking the patient down, or, if they were past talking, already doing what needed to be done. The other nurses liked her. They didn't always understand her, but they liked her. She brought coffee on Sunday mornings. She remembered birthdays. She covered shifts without being asked when someone's kid was sick. She just didn't talk about herself very much, and after a while people stopped asking. That suited her fine too. She had moved to Calgary 4 years ago from a smaller city she never specified. Before that, she said, she had worked in emergency medicine in various places. She said it the way you'd say you'd worked in retail. Easily, without detail, moving on to the next subject before anyone could follow up. People assumed she meant other hospitals, other provinces. Nobody thought to ask anything more specific. The ear at Sunridge ran her hard, and she let it. 12-hour shifts, sometimes 14 when things went sideways. Holidays, overnight, whatever needed filling. Her colleagues assumed she had no family obligations. They were not entirely wrong. She had a small apartment on the north side that she kept very clean and mostly bare. A good coffee maker, a shelf of books, mostly history, mostly worn paperbacks with cracked spines. A houseplant she had kept alive for 3 years, through some combination of neglect and stubbornness that she found privately amusing. A cat named Garrison who was enormous and indifferent, and who sometimes, in the early hours when she came home from a night shift and sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea she was too tired to drink, walked across the table and put his large gray head under her hand. Those were the moments she liked best. Quiet, uncomplicated, no one needing anything from her that she didn't know how to give. She had gotten good at building that kind of life. It had taken work. The shift that changed everything started like every other shift. It was a Tuesday in late October. Joanna came in at 7 in the evening, changed into scrubs, tied her hair back, and checked the board. 3 in observation, 1 waiting for imaging, 2 in triage, and a man in Bay 4 who had come in with chest pains and was now insisting he was fine and wanted to leave, which meant he was either fine or dying, and someone needed to go figure out which. She went to Bay 4 first. His name was Gordon Ashby. 61. Retired electrician. The kind of man who had spent his whole life being told he was too stubborn for his own good and had taken it as a compliment. He was sitting on the edge of the bed with his jacket half on, and when Joanna pulled back the curtain, he gave her the look that said he was about to explain why he didn't need to be there. She didn't let him. "Mr. Ashby," she said, pulling on a pair of gloves. "I need 30 seconds to look at something, and then I'll decide whether you're leaving." He blinked. "I didn't say you could, I know." 30 seconds. She checked his color, his nail beds, the way he was holding himself. She listened. She asked 2 questions, not the ones on the intake form, but different ones, specific, and the way he answered them told her something the form would not have caught. "You're staying," she said. He started to argue. "Mr. Ashby." Her voice didn't change. It never changed. "There is something going on with your heart that needs a physician to look at tonight." "Not tomorrow." "Tonight. You can be angry about that later, once we know you're not going to drop dead in the parking lot." He stayed. By midnight, the cardiologist had confirmed a partially blocked artery and scheduled him for a procedure in the morning. His daughter arrived around 1 a.m. and cried in the hallway, and Joanna gave her a cup of bad coffee and sat with her for 4 minutes before the radio called her back to triage. "Thank you," the daughter said. "Thank you for making him stay." Joanna nodded and went back to work. That was a Tuesday. The following Tuesday was the one she would think about for a long time afterward. She was coming off a double. 16 hours, which was not unusual, and the kind of 16 hours that felt like it had taken place underwater, slow in the wrong moments, suddenly very fast in others. She had eaten half a sandwich at some point and could not remember when. She was at the nursing station writing up notes when the automatic doors at the far end of the corridor opened, and she felt, before she saw anything, something shift in the air of the room. It was a thing she had learned to pay attention to, that shift. She looked up. There were 4 of them. They came in through the main entrance in a loose group, not rushing, and they were not in uniform. Civilian clothes, jeans, jackets, but there was something in the way they moved that announced what they were to anyone who knew how to read it. The particular attention, the way they checked sight lines without seeming to, the way none of them walked with their back to the room. She knew that walk. She had walked that way herself. She still did, sometimes, without meaning to. The one in front, tall, broad across the shoulders, dark-haired with some gray in it now, was pushing a wheelchair. The man in the wheelchair had his left leg ending just below the knee. Joanna set down her pen. The tall one, she recognized him first, though it took a moment, because it had been 9 years, and his face had changed the way faces do when enough hard things have happened. Scanned the room and then found her, and stopped. He said something quietly to the others. They stopped too. She did not move. His name was Daniel Vreeland. He had been a warrant officer when she knew him. She didn't know what he was now. She didn't know what any of them were now. The man in the wheelchair was looking at her too. His name had been Terrence Obie, but she caught herself. Different channel. That was another story. Another channel's names. She looked again. She didn't know his name yet. She would. Vreeland walked toward her. He was not in a hurry, neither was she. When he reached the nursing station, he stopped on the other side of the counter. "Steele," he said. "Vreeland," she said. It was 9 years of silence compressed into 2 words, and neither of them acknowledged it. That was also something she had learned. How to hold a lot of weight in very little language. "You're hard to find," he said. "I know," she said. She had not hidden exactly. That wasn't the right word for it. She had just moved, changed locations, taken jobs that asked nothing about the years before, in hospitals that were busy enough that nobody needed to dig into her past to know she was good at what she did. There was a difference between hiding and simply not volunteering information. She had told herself that for a long time. Vreeland was watching her with the same expression she remembered. Steady, patient, like a man who had learned that most things worth knowing revealed themselves if you waited long enough. "Is there somewhere we can talk?" he said. She looked around the ward. The shift was winding down. The board was manageable. Quan. She glanced at the other nurse on duty. Quan was covering. Quan was solid, was handling the far end. "Give me 10 minutes, she said. She finished her notes, took her time. Not to make them wait, but because she needed the 10 minutes for herself. Her hands were completely steady. They always were. That wasn't the problem. The problem was something in her chest, a tightening that had nothing to do with anything medical that she hadn't felt in a long time and had been comfortable not feeling. She took them to the family consultation room. It was small and smelled like bad carpet, and there was a box of tissues on the table that nobody had restocked. She sat on one side. Vreeland sat across from her. The man in the wheelchair, whose name, she had now been told, was Cresswell, positioned himself at the end of the table. The other two stood near the door, not blocking it, just there. She had learned their names too now, Hadfield, Bork. She didn't know them. They were younger, after her time. "How did you find me?" she asked. It wasn't a hostile question. It was the practical one. "It took a while," Vreeland said. "Bork is good with records." "I bet he is." There was a pause. Not uncomfortable. The kind of pause where people were deciding what to say first, which meant they had a lot to say and were trying to find the right beginning. Cresswell spoke first. He had a quiet voice, lower than she expected from a man his size. He was maybe 35 now. When she had known him, when she had been with the unit before, he had been 26, and knew enough that some of the older hands still called him by his last name only, the way you did with new ones until they earned their first name back. "I want to tell you something," he said. She waited. "I lost the leg on the second tour," he said. "Not the one, not from before, a different one. A truck, on a road outside of Kandahar, and I was the only one in the truck, and I wasn't in good shape. For about 40 minutes on the side of that road, I wasn't in good shape at all." She held his gaze, didn't say anything. "And what I was thinking about," he said, "in those 40 minutes was something you did. What I saw you do once in a different situation, and I decided. I told myself that if I got through it, I was going to find you and tell you that. Because nobody told you." She looked at him. "Nobody told you," he said again. "And that seemed wrong to me. It seemed like something that needed correcting." She had been 25 when she was embedded with the unit. She had been a medic before that, proper training, CFB Petawawa, and then Borden. And then she had been selected for something quieter and more specific. And she had said yes because at 25 she was not yet sure what she was afraid of, and yes felt like the right answer to most things. The work was not what she had expected. Nothing was what she expected. She had been good at it. She had not expected that, either. Not the specific kind of good she turned out to be, which was not just the medical competence but the ability to stay very calm in circumstances that made experienced people lose their capacity for rational thought. She didn't know where it came from. It was just there. Reliable. The way the vending machine trick was reliable. Something that worked. She had worked with the unit for 2 years. The things that happened in those 2 years were classified at a level that meant she didn't talk about them with anyone ever. And, after a while, the not talking had spread to cover other things. Quieter things, the kind of things that were not classified but that she had no language for anymore, and so they went unspoken too. She left the unit. She went back to civilian nursing. She moved. She moved again. She became the person who caught the granola bar before it hit the broken tray. What she had done, the specific thing Cresswell was talking about, was this. There had been a building, a night, 3 men with injuries that were all serious and one of them critical, and she had been the only medical person for a significant distance in any direction. And there had been a decision to make about who got what, in what order, with what she had available. It was the kind of decision that had a name in triage training. She had made that decision in the dark, on the floor, with her hands covered in things she didn't think about anymore, and she had been right. That was the part nobody knew how to account for, not the courage, because courage was expected, but the being right. All 3 had made it. Cresswell had been one of the 3. She had not known. After she had not been told, the unit had rotated, and she had rotated out, and that was how it went. You didn't get updates. You moved to the next thing. For 9 years she had not known. All 3, she said. Her voice was even. She was very good at even. Vreeland nodded. Hadfield's brother was the 3rd one. He tilted his head slightly toward the man standing by the door. Hadfield was looking at the floor. He was a big man, bigger than Vreeland, and he was looking at the floor the way a big man does when he is trying very hard not to let his face do something he's not ready to do in front of people. She looked at him for a moment. "Your brother," she said. Hadfield looked up. His jaw was tight. He nodded once. "He's good," Vreeland said quietly. "He's in Thunder Bay now. He has 3 kids. She absorbed that. 3 kids in Thunder Bay. A whole life that had continued. 9 years of Tuesdays, and granola bars, and breakfasts, and bad days and good ones, and 3 small people who existed because of a decision she had made in the dark, on a floor she never thought about anymore. She put her hands flat on the table. They were steady. They were always steady. "Okay," she said. It was not an insufficient word. It was the only word she had. Cresswell leaned forward slightly. "I've been in and out of hospitals since the truck," he said. "A lot of hospitals. I've had good people take care of me. But I want you to know something, as someone who has been on both sides of that, what you do here." He gestured, vaguely, toward the ward. "People think it's ordinary. They walk in, and there's someone at the desk, and they take for granted that person knows what they're doing. They don't think about the fact that this is all, that it's the same thing, what you did then and what you do now. The knowing what to do, the doing it anyway." She looked at him. "People should know," he said. "That's all I'm saying. People should know who they're dealing with." She almost said something deflecting. She was good at deflections. She had 9 years of practice at deflections, and she had a very good one ready. Something practical and self-deprecating that would have moved the conversation somewhere easier. She didn't say it. Instead, she sat with it for a moment. The weight of what he was saying, which was not really about her at all. It was about themselves. About the needing to complete a circuit that had been open for 9 years, the needing to put something to rest that could not be put to rest until the person who deserved to know had been told. She thought about Mr. Ashby's daughter, crying in the hallway with bad coffee. Thank you for making him stay. She thought about the thing in her chest that had tightened when the automatic doors opened, and the shift in the air of the room had told her something was different. She thought about Garrison the cat, enormous and indifferent, putting his large gray head under her hand in the quiet hours when the rest of the world was asleep. You made a life from what you could reach. You made it carefully, and you held it steady, and that was enough. It had been enough. Except that sitting across from Cresswell and looking at the man by the door who had a brother in Thunder Bay with 3 children, she thought that maybe enough was not the only thing a life needed to be. "Did you need anything?" she asked. "Medically? Is that why you came to the hospital?" Cresswell smiled. It was a real smile, slow, a little worn at the edges. "No," he said. "I have a follow-up at Foothills on Thursday. We came here because this is where you were." She nodded. "How did you?" "The Calgary part. How did you know?" "I told you," Vreeland said. "Bork is good with records." Bork, still by the door, had the expression of someone trying not to look pleased with himself. "Are you here just for tonight?" Shreeland said. "We're staying until Thursday," Vreeland said. "Drove in from Edmonton. Cresswell's appointment's not till morning Thursday. Long drive. Not really." It wasn't, she knew. For men like these, Edmonton to Calgary was nothing. They had driven in considerably harder conditions through considerably less cooperative terrain than the QE2 in October. She looked at all of them. Bork by the door, Hadfield by the door, who had composed himself now and was looking at her with something open in his expression that she didn't have a word for. Vreeland, who had not changed as much as she thought, who still had that particular patience that was not passivity, but something more like a deep confidence that the world would reveal itself in time. Cresswell, who had 40 minutes on the side of a road in Kandahar, and had spent them thinking about something she did, and had then come a significant distance to say so. She thought about what it cost them, not the drive, not the time. The other thing, the reopening. The men who came back to something were men who had to choose to walk back toward it, and that was its own kind of work. "Thank you," she said, "for coming. I didn't know it. I didn't know how any of it ended." "We know," Vreeland said. "It matters." "Knowing, yeah," he said. "It does." She finished her shift at 8 in the morning. The ward had quieted sometime around 4, and she had spent the last few hours doing the steady, unglamorous work of an overnight. Check-ins, medications, charting the man in Bay 3 who couldn't sleep and wanted to talk about his garden, which she let him because nobody was coding and he had the most careful description of a raised bed tomato situation she had ever heard. Quan raised an eyebrow at her when she came back to the station after the consultation room. "Friends?" Quan asked. "Old colleagues," she said. "Military." She looked at Quan. "What makes you say that? The way they stand," Quan said simply. "My dad was in the forces. I know the stand." Joanna almost said something, and then she thought about what Cresswell had said. People should know who they're dealing with. "Yes," she said. "Old colleagues from when I was embedded. A long time ago." Quan nodded, said nothing else. But before Joanna turned back to the board, Quan said quietly, "Thank you for your service." It was a thing people said. Joanna had always found it slightly uncomfortable, the receiving of it. Not because it wasn't genuine, but because she had never quite known what to do with it, where to put it. She put it somewhere different this time. "Thank you," she said, and meant it. Outside the hospital, it was October in Calgary, which meant the sky was a hard, thin blue, and the wind had an edge to it that cut through whatever you were wearing and reminded you that winter was not making requests, it was making announcements. She stood outside the main entrance for a minute. She did this sometimes, the transition, letting the outside air do its work of separating the shift from whatever came after. Vreeland was leaning against the wall 10 feet away. She hadn't expected him. "I thought you'd be at the hotel," she said. "I thought you'd want coffee," he said. He held up a paper cup from the place on the corner. "The stuff inside is criminal." She took it. He was not wrong about the inside stuff. They stood there in the October cold for a while, not talking, which was comfortable in the way that silence between people who have been through significant things together is sometimes comfortable. Not because there's nothing to say, but because there's too much. And the standing there is itself a kind of saying. "Cresswell was right," he said eventually. "You're not easy to find." "I wasn't trying to be found," she said. "No." A pause. "Are you good, Steele?" Actually. It was the question she was least equipped for. She was excellent at every other kind of assessment. She could tell you the GCS score of a man who'd taken a fall. She could read a 12 lead like a piece of music. She could look at someone in triage and know in 30 seconds what was wrong and in what order to address it. She was very bad at answering when someone asked about her. "I'm building something," she said, which was the truest thing she'd said in a while. "I think I'm building something." Vreeland nodded like that was an answer. He was always good at treating half answers like complete ones. "Hadfield's going to call you," he said. "He won't make it a thing. His brother wanted to, and he didn't know how." She thought about a man in Thunder Bay. 3 kids she'd never meet. A Tuesday that had made all subsequent Tuesdays possible. "Tell him I'll pick up," she said. She went home. She fed Garrison, who accepted the attention with the regal indifference of a cat who knows he is essential and feels no need to perform gratitude about it. She made tea she was too tired to drink. She sat at the kitchen table. The sun was coming up, through the window of her north side apartment. She could see the edge of it, the particular quality of light that October mornings had in Calgary. Clear and cold and almost painfully honest, the kind of light that showed everything. She had spent 9 years building a life that was careful and competent and contained. It was a good life. She meant that. The ward at Sunridge, Garrison, the granola bar trick, the man with the tomatoes in Bay 3. She did not regret it, but something had shifted. Not broken, not undone, shifted. The way a bone that has been set correctly shifts when the healing is finally finished, and the thing that replaced it is a little different, but actually stronger, actually better fused. She had not known that 3 men were alive. She knew it now. She had not known that her name had been said, in the dark, in difficult circumstances, by a man who was trying very hard to stay alive and reached for the nearest thing that felt like proof it was possible. She knew that now, too. She thought about what it meant to be known, not seen. She was seen every shift, every 12 hours, by everyone in the ward who needed something, but known. The specific knowing of who you actually were, underneath the useful, competent surface of you. Cresswell had said people should know who they're dealing with. He meant it as a gift, a thing he was offering. But sitting at the kitchen table, with the October light coming through the window, she thought that maybe it was something else, too. Maybe it was a question. A gentle one, honestly asked. "Do you know who you're dealing with? Do you let yourself know?" She had been very good for 9 years at being useful. She had been less good at being present. There was a difference. She was starting to understand the difference. Garrison walked across the table and put his large gray head under her hand. She sat there in the cold light of a Wednesday morning that had come out of a Tuesday she would not forget, and she thought about a man in Thunder Bay with 3 kids and about Hadfield's face when he looked up from the floor and found her looking at him, and about Vreeland leaning against a hospital wall in the October wind, with 2 cups of coffee, because he knew the inside stuff was criminal, and she thought about all the things she had built carefully and competently and alone. She thought about what it might look like to let someone in. Not all at once, not recklessly. She was not built for reckless. She was built for precision, for patience, for knowing when to act and when to hold. But she thought it might be time to hold less. She picked up her phone. She had Vreeland's number now, from the contact card he had left at the nursing station. She did not call it. Not yet. She set the phone on the table in front of her where she could see it, and she drank her tea, and she watched the light change over Calgary as the morning came in, and for the first time in a long time she did not feel like a fixture. She felt like a person, which was harder, and also better, and entirely worth the difficulty of it.